Small group this morning. All right. Not ready to battle the third day, huh? Is that what it is? So welcome, everybody. I'll get started. One tries not to be too Irish. My Presbyterian friend says she is on time because her father told her, she's always on time because her father told her if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. So when she comes to my house for any kind of a gathering or a party, and she realizes she's 10 minutes early, but that Tricia will have a heart attack if she's there early, so she circles my house around the block, you know. But Irish people typically say you're fine until the 11th minute. Yes, you can be 10 minutes late, but after the 11th, it's a little bit rude. So there you go. I lived in Peru. You could be 3 hours late. There was no problem. Yeah, that was great. We called it hora peruana, Peruvian time. So, in Irish time, we begin. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. A prayer poem to start our day. The world now is too dangerous and too beautiful for anything but love. May your eyes be so blessed you see God in everyone. Your ears so you hear the cry of the poor. May your hands be so blessed that everything you touch is a sacrament. Your lips so you speak nothing but the truth with love. May your feet be so blessed you run to those who need you. And may your heart be so opened, so set on fire that your love changes everything. And may the blessing of the God who created you, loves you, and sustains you be with you now and always. And so we say, Amen. Isn't that beautiful? That's written by Dean Baker in a book called The Black Rock Prayer Book. And I found it a few years ago, and I've just been sustained by it on a regular basis. Really enjoyed that. So we'll move into some practicalities today with respect to living into our discipleship, and we'll settle in on the particulars of eco-justice, the justice around the environment, the care for creation, etc. And that can be just a little grim. So I thought I can't give them all grim this morning. So I'm going to share with you a fun little story that has just enchanted me. It's based on the fourth gospel, and what we often call, quite erroneously, the first miracle of Jesus, which of course, it's only the first miracle of Jesus in John's gospel. Of course, the wedding feast at Cana. But this would be what you might call a different perspective on it. It's what happens when Mom was there, and Mom is telling the story in what sounds a little bit like a modern voice of today. And this telling came from the Iona community, whom I've always respected for many, many years. And she begins, well, he was 30 when it happened. And there was no warning. He had never done that kind of a thing before, though we'd been at plenty weddings. But this was a really big wedding. It was Isaac Morgenthaler's daughter who was marrying a boy from the city, and everyone in our village was invited. So I says to him, listen, Jesus, there's going to be lots of girls at this affair, and you're 30 and not getting any younger. So don't be backwards at coming forward just because your old mother's there. I'll not be watching you. Well, he just rolled his eyes the way his father used to. And so I said no more. At any rate, we got to the wedding and into the reception, and what a spread! There There was breaded octopus and roast quail and pomegranate sauce. There were pickled locusts and mushroom omelets for the vegetarians. Everything was magnificent, except for the olives. Now, personally, I don't like olives. They talk back to me, if you know what I mean. But everyone who ate them said, they're very salty. So between that and the heat, it was about 87 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a lot of drinking going on. And we must have been sitting at the table for over 2 hours, and everyone was talking at the top of their voice. And then I noticed it got distinctly quieter, maudlin even. So I turned to our Jesus and said, I think the wine's run out. He just turned to me and rolled his eyes and said, your powers of observation are beyond me, Mother. But I knew from the way he said it that he might be up to something. So when I saw him rising from the table and going to the kitchen, I said to one of the waiters, you see that man walking towards the kitchen? That's my boy. Follow him and do what he tells you. Well, exactly what happened after that, I don't know. There are about a dozen different stories. According to Jesus, he just asked for the big wine jars to be filled with water. And then he lifted them one at a time and gave them to the waiters and told them to take them to the tables. And in no time at all, the noise level was back at its peak. Everybody was congratulating Mr. Morgenthaler on the Beaujolais Nouveau. And Jesus came back to the table, and when he came back to the table, I said to him, Jesus, how come with all the water jugs in my kitchen, you've never turned your hand to winemaking before? And he just rolled his eyes the way his father used to. And then he said, Mother, I just wanted everybody to be as happy at this wedding with wine as you are in your kitchen without it. Well, that was all in the past. But, ever since, there's been a constant flow of invitations from people who would like Jesus to come to their wedding. Isn't it lovely? Yeah. It has little moments of wisdom in it that I always hold on to. The prevalence there and the importance of water, And I remember I lived in France many years ago. I went to college there for a year and then had friends. It was a third generation friendship thing in our family. And so I lived with a family. But I noticed that they drank wine all the time. They drank wine every single lunchtime. It was red wine, and they'd pour water into it. And it wasn't because they needed alcohol. It was just the habit of the country. And when I started in biblical studies, one of the things I ran into is the prevalence of wine drinking in the ancient Near East. Why? Because the water was so contaminated many times. And so it was safer to drink wine than water. Just a little tidbit of useless information for you when you're next chatting with your children about the first century, as one does over Christmas. So there's that for you. But it's lighthearted, and you know what I love about it particularly is it messes with my rather traditional image of Mary. We don't usually project ourselves with Mary into what she might have been like, say, in her 50s or 60s, and there's just a lovely imaginative way of thinking about her in that way. So I share that with you. I do not have that on the list of things because I don't have it in the computer. I have it, see what I did because I was coming here? I tore the pages out of my book. My father would be rolling in his grave as a bookseller, tearing pages out of a book, no less, just for Jesus and a wine story. Anyway, that's just to hold on to as a little bit of lightness, shall we say, for the day. And so what I want to do is I want to begin by crocheting, if you like, back into some of the thoughts that we've been cultivating over the last few days. And one of the things that struck me when I was talking about the profound need for a new understanding of discipleship, a discipleship that causes us to be not focused so much on our very, very authentic and appropriate worship of Jesus, but a discipleship that invites us to focus on where is Jesus pointing? Where is he saying we need to be directing our attentions? Kingdom of God, the least among us, the disposable, the dismissed, those considered unimportant, those who are judged and found lacking. That's kingdom of heaven. And what are we called to do in our discipleship? Go ahead, walk over, sit down, not this being hauled up, so that we're the helpers to people, not that, but so that we simply sit down beside them and become companions with them on the journey. We tell our story, they tell their story. We become joined in the story making, and so we literally become people who walk together. And there's a problem with that we often encounter, because a lot of us don't necessarily believe that we have any business at all consorting, as they'd have called it in Ireland, consorting with those kind of people. Some of the folks whom we dismiss as being, in Ireland we have a word, chancers. Somebody who's a chancer, somebody who's, they're trying to get something from you. They're spinning you a story, they're maybe holding the hand out, and they use the word chancer. It's a very uncharitable word. And in Ireland, there's actually quite a lot of what here you called panhandling. In Ireland, we call it begging. And there are a lot of people on the streets who are allowed to sit on the pavement and to hold their hand out. And they always say, I'll say a prayer for you. If you could give me a helping hand, God bless you, I'd say a prayer for you. They never say, could you give me anything? They usually just say, I'll say a prayer for you. I'll say a prayer for you. It's not a polite way of begging, I always thought. But they receive an awful lot of judgment from people, as one does. And when we're invited to move away, as I indicated on our first evening together, when we're invited to move away from judgment of those of whom we disapprove, or those who we think don't belong here, all of those kinds of things, we have a pretty story in our head that we can tell about why it is that my way of thinking is perfectly appropriate, right? Because in our head, we never say, well, I'm prejudiced. We never say, well, I'm just against migrants because I just think our land should just be for us and nobody else because we're special. We never think that way. We create a lovely set of stories and justifications, right, for ourselves. And the first thing I have to say about that is, oh, thank you. Isn't Irene amazing? Absolutely. These are the handouts with the poems that I've used and so on. So I'll be putting those, giving those out at the end. There's one in there that I don't want you to have until I read it. It's a thing, you know. Don't read ahead. But I remember going to a 12-step program one time. We were experimenting with using the 12-step AA model for a spirituality course that we were wanting to develop. And we get to step 4, for those of you who know this daunting experience of the 12-step. And it says, okay, our facilitator says, now we'll conduct a searching and fearless moral inventory. Doesn't that sound scary? We'll conduct a searching and fearless moral inventory. We will evaluate with respect to that which is in our lives that is out of control and that we are passing on to God, handing over to God or our higher power. In this case, we were saying God. We will now we will scrutinize our own actions with respect to this particular issue. For alcoholics, of course, it's the alcoholism. In our case, it was those areas in our lives when we didn't think we had any control. And I had a particular set of issues in my life that I was not in control of and that I was trying very hard to control. And we will not talk about mothers-in-law. But mine was 2 doors away. See, this means there's a story told in between the hands, right? And so I was not dealing with it well. And what she said is, so conduct a searching and fearless moral inventory, and you can take a pen and do a little list making and so on. And then she said, oh, and by the way, no justifications allowed. And I dropped my pen. And I said, what do you mean no justifications allowed? My anger had boiled up so many times, and not very polite words had, in those days, come out of my mouth towards this particular person in my life. And I justified it because, well, I had the labels to tell, the control freakedness, the this, the that, the interference, the border, bad boundaries. I had all of the list of reasons why it was okay for me to demean her with that person with my words. And she said no justifications allowed. And you know, that's the 12-step process, that you have to assess all of your actions, and you have to do so searchingly and fearlessly and with no justifications allowed. My life was ruined. I was absolutely distraught because it removed me from my comfort. And I've been talking about this need to cultivate discomfort and to try to find a way to be okay with a holy disruption that we do in our lives so that we can be nudged out of the places in our lives where we're complacent. And that day ruined me forever. And I like to bring everybody along into my ruination so that I'm not alone in my poor old journey, right? So I'm offering you that every time you assess a difficult part of your life or any kind of area in which you have distress, discomfort, anger, and you find yourself responding in a way that is not, doesn't represent yourself at your best. You say to yourself, all right, let's do a searching and fearless moral inventory here. No justifications allowed. Fascinating as an honest-making endeavor. And so we try to cultivate discomfort. There's a major obstacle in our world, and you'll hear this, of course, now if we move to talking about the political sphere. There's something called, and you'll have heard people say this, use this phrase, which is cognitive dissonance. Have you heard that? Cognitive dissonance. And it's not trippingly on the tongue of everybody in normal everyday conversations with our families, but it's this. It's what people do, and they do a great deal to justify their belief systems, even if it means tolerating 1,000 inconsistencies. So we have a belief system, perhaps about the way the world works, or the way the world should work, or the way certain public figures are, or no, they're not, I don't believe that. And our belief system that we hold dear. And we'll hold on to those beliefs despite the fact that over and over and over and over again, we see the inconsistencies in it. And we resist what some call the reality check that we allow ourselves to have to contend with if we get rid, or if we move away from cognitive dissonance. In order to be able to move away from justifying my belief systems, it requires one crucial ingredient, which is humility, intellectual humility. The question when you ask yourself, is it possible that I don't actually know it all? Is it possible that I'm holding on to a belief that I shouldn't hold on to because I have not conducted enough inquiry into it? And that's why for our discipleship, we're always, and in canon law, whenever you're making big decisions around moral issues, you're having to kind of look into your conscience. The canon lawyers will tell you that you must always step into our tradition, spend some time learning about our Catholic tradition, and then find somebody who is who can be a mentor to you in understanding and interpreting the Catholic tradition, so that you can then make a decision in good conscience. And you know we are bound by our conscience. I don't know if you understand what an enormously significant point that is. In Catholic theology, when you're making a moral decision in good conscience, there are steps to take. And this will be relevant even for when we talk about the environment and so on in a minute. The first step to take is to take a look at your own situation in life that is part of whatever's going on, this decision that you have to make. And take an honest look at all the factors that are influencing that. Secondly, pray. Invite the Holy Spirit in to pray for your discernment about the decision that you're about to make. The third is find out what Catholic teaching is with respect to this, what the Catholic doctrine is. I used to get calls in my office all the time. What does Catholic teaching say about this or that? And I would say, let's come on into my office. You need to come on into my office to have that conversation. I don't have those over the phone. And so they'd come in and they'd sit down, and I'd explain to them exactly what Catholic teaching was about a particular issue, and the history behind that, and the contextualization of that doctrine and where it came from. Probably way more information than they wanted. And then they are invited to pray again for the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And they can seek more than one mentor in Catholicism. They can seek advice or consultation. They can consult with somebody whose discipleship they admire. And then, as I say, step 4, the prayer again. And step 5 is then use prudence, but make your decision. Make your decision. The way I learned Catholic moral theology from one of my professors, she said this: whatever you make in step 5, whatever decision you realize is the right decision to make in step 5, after the prayer and those steps that I just mentioned, you are bound by that decision. It is God's voice in you, guiding you. So it's not a lazy conscience. It's the full-blown preparation of conscience, and you are bound by that, even if that decision that you make is not completely in line with step 3. You are bound by what your conscience tells you to do. I must have had 5 issues, at least, probably way more, but 5 issues I remember where I called the office, the tribunal. Every diocese has a tribunal, and they're the experts in canon law. And I would explain a moral dilemma that somebody had come to me with, and I would say, this is the way they're thinking of going. What do you think? And they would say, they're making the steps of making a moral decision in good conscience, and therefore there is nothing wrong with that. You never expect that the least judgmental people in the world will be sitting in the tribunal at the diocese. But I'm here to tell you that in my experience over 30 years, in what we called a conservative diocese, I met more compassion and more understanding in the tribunal, and more belief in the conscience, in the personal conscience, because that is the little voice of God who has listened to your prayer and your concerns and has helped guide you through the process. And so all of that process in rearranging our belief system and having to become informed in a way that helps us make our conscience, all of that requires the humility that underlies that process that I've just explained to you. And so one of the things that happens is that we don't always observe the best. We don't always bring the best of ourselves to our decision making. And let me find where this morning I got a little confused. I was chatting and I forgot to put my papers in the right order. So talk among yourselves for just a moment about the wisdom of making a moral decision in good conscience while I find my excellent next page that is about discipleship gone wrong. So it's a very important page. Because it's a lovely, very distressing poem. You know I love to give you distressing poems. I'll give you a nice one while it's revealing itself. It's lurking in the background. Let's give you the nice one. I don't know if you know the poet Naomi Shihab Nye. Very wise poet. I don't have any books of hers, but I'm a member of the American Society of Poets, and if you go to their website, you'll find a lot of poetry that she has actually on their website. This one is called Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things, feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead at the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow, you must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then, it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Turn to your neighbor and ask your neighbor, when's the last time you experienced beautiful kindness from somebody? Go for it. I'll just mumble to myself so I create a background noise so that you won't be embarrassed by having your voice heard. Did you get a chance to talk to each other? Okay. Hold on to that one, because I think there's something about kindness that I find is very close to sacramentality. There's something about kindness that when you reflect on it later, you say, well, that was pretty sacramental, really. Well, you only use that language if you're me. What you're really going to say is, that seems like a holy moment, right? Can we say that? You know how I learned about sacramentality? Somebody once, at the very early stages of my learning, and I'm always passing on my learning to people, because I kind of learned things as if they were explaining it to a kindergartner, you know? And I hold on to that because it served me well. And they said, Christ is the sacrament of God, and the church is the sacrament of Christ. And I got to thinking about that. And then, of course, we have sacraments that help us to become the people of the church. And a sacrament is that which, it's almost the same thing as we call a symbol, but we don't like the word symbol in Catholicism because we always think it means not really. And but in sacramentality thinking, a sacrament is that which points to and embodies the fullness of God, right? A sacrament is something that points to and embodies the fullness of God. Christ is the sacrament of God. Christ is always pointing to God, and Christ embodies the fullness of God. And we as a church, we're still trying to live into our own sacramentality, aren't we? We're trying to point to and embody the fullness of Christ. And then in our sacraments, each of what once upon a time, and I want to say it was the 11th century or the 1100s, a man, I want to say his name was Richard Simon, wrote a pamphlet, a booklet, where he described 7 sacraments. And we took it, and we ran with it. And to this day, we talk about the 7 sacraments. Isn't that fascinating? It emerged in about the 11th century, actually. And so when we experience a sacrament, properly we should say to ourselves, when I'm living that sacrament, because a sacrament is something that we receive and then live into, right? Participate in the reception of it, and then live into it, and then walk it, if you like, every day. And when I'm thinking about the sacraments, I think about myself having a bad year at Trinity College, Dublin, the first year. Confession, they tell me, is good for the soul. I'm hoping my soul gets a nice wash this morning. Okay, because I'm going to tell you, that first year at Trinity College, right after I came back from living in France, and I was doing history and political science, and I had very high notions about myself, but I was not particularly studious. And I was just having, shall we say, a very busy year. Does the gesture say it all? There was lots of time I think I spent under a table somewhere, as one does, as one should not. Come the exams, which in Trinity College Dublin, the honours courses exams always happened in September, right before you were due to go back for the new year of scholarly work in October. So the news of the exams results comes over the phone from my friend Edna. And they call me Pom in Ireland for Patricia O'Mahony. So Pom, the results are in. They are. Yes, they posted them up. I'm telling you, it was almost like what Luther posted, you know, in his protestations. They post the results up outside, on the door outside the dining hall. And I said, how did I do? She said, you didn't get it. And I said, I didn't. No, how bad? Very bad. How bad? Exactly. Well, you know how there's a line underneath those who passed, and then there's a whole list of those who didn't pass, and you were down towards the bottom of that one. Oh, holy moly. All right. Thanks, Edna. I go back to dinner. We're sitting in the kitchen. All of the siblings are there. I'm one of 6. Luckily, the little guy was quite young yet, so he wasn't registering. But the older 5 of us are all in a clump, so they're there. My mother is there. My father, who is old enough to be my grandfather, is doing a little carving of a roast or something like that on the side. And I sidled up to my mother and I said, that was it now. Well, I didn't make it. Oh, Patricia. The world didn't fall in. The ceiling is still there. I go back, I sit down at the end of the table, and the tears are coming down onto my face. And my sister, one sister, 4 brothers, swivels her head down to me, and she looks, she says, why is Patricia crying? And my mother, the mistress of understatement, Patricia didn't have the best of luck in the exams this year. My sister, as only sisters can do, you failed? Swivel, 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 all eyes down towards me. Dead silence. Immediately, swivel, 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 all eyes back up to my father, who was sitting, as only Irish and English people can do, holding peas on the curved backside of a fork. Have you ever seen how English people eat and Irish people eat forks? They eat peas. We balance all of the food on the back of the fork. And he has the peas on the fork mid-mouth. And he's stopped. And he's at this stage probably 71 years old. And I'm 17. 18. So he's 72. And he says, well, I suppose it takes a great deal of study to get those difficult university exams. At the time, I kind of went, whew. Later, of course, I was invited to, we had a thing called the drawing room. We were invited to the drawing room to discuss what I might do with my future. I became a languages and literature major, and I started all over again. Languages and literature have always been my thing. Why I thought I should be doing medieval history, God only knows, but there you go. But it took me years studying sacraments and sacramentality before I said, I know how this works now. When I go to see, as you can tell, I spend a decent amount of time imagining myself seeing the face of God. When I go to see the face of God, I will say, I knew that was you in Dad's forgiveness. I knew it. I didn't know it at the time. My aha moment came probably an easy 20 plus years later. But when you realize that you have been in God's presence through the living of the sacrament, I went and celebrated it in church. We celebrate the sacraments liturgically, but the living of it happens at home and around us. But we don't walk around saying, I'm going to have a little chat with you wherein I exercise living my sacramentality. We don't say that to our children, do we? No, we just forgive them. And they might say someday, I think perhaps that was the face of God. Imagine if we allow ourselves to become a community wherein that kind of living sacramentally actually occurs. Wouldn't it be just the peachiest thing ever? Unfortunately, I found my bad news discipleship page. Unfortunately, sometimes what we hear is this. This is a version of Matthew 25, gone wrong. I was hungry, and you formed a debating society to discuss it. I was in prison, and you just complained about the crime rate. I was naked, and you debated the morality of my appearance. I was sick, and you thanked God for your health. I was homeless, and you preached to me about the shelter of God's love. You seem so holy, so close to God, but I'm still hungry, lonely, in cold, and in pain. Does it really matter? Matthew 25, gone wrong. Unfortunately, I bet none of us in this worship space today can say that we've never heard something close to this, but we have. We have work to do. We need to get better. I need to get better. I'll just speak for me. I have more work to do in making sure that I'm walking and talking Matthew 25, which is the absolute embodiment of all of the wisdom of the ancient ones that we spent some time looking at the first day or two. And then there's this prayer, which is, if you like, similar to what we hear in Matthew. You know the blesseds, the Beatitudes? First of all, I always want to say this about the Beatitudes because I don't think I hear it preached enough. Of course, it's probably preached here this way. But I think it's very important that we understand that the 8 Beatitudes, the first 4 represent the trials and tribulations that people experience. The second 4 match them. This is what people do if they respond to the first 4. So the first 4 are those who are experiencing distress, hurt, disillusionment, dismissal of their personhood, all of that. The second 4 are called for us to buckle up and see if we can't respond to each of those. Take another look and you'll find it absolutely fascinating. And clap anybody who preaches it when they have Beatitudes Day. Well, I don't know if you're allowed to do applause here. Some churches, I've heard rumors that they actually applaud after a homily. So you might want to start encouraging anybody who gives a homily that's really sound on the hard work of the Beatitudes. You might want to encourage them. This is a different version, so to speak, on how we might think of some Beatitudes for today. Blessed are those whose fear looks a lot like courage. Blessed are those whose fear looks a lot like courage. Blessed are those who have no safety net, no soft place to land. Blessed are those who leap anyway. Blessed are those who feel the singe of the target as it burns deeper, wider, brighter on their back. Blessed are the gaslighted. Blessed are those who rehearse their truths over and over and over, even when friends' ears are raw, even when it echoes in an empty chamber. Blessed are the entangled. Blessed are those who have been handed a mess. Blessed are those who did nothing to deserve this. Blessed are those who have been labeled, pigeonholed, categorized, written off. Blessed are those who have been maligned. Blessed are those who persevere through the language of weeds, and though that language of weeds continues to grow all around. Blessed are those who have saved the receipts, and blessed are they when they are derided for it. Blessed are those whose proof has been written on their hearts and minds, on their very being. Blessed are those who have laid down their own agendas for a friend. That one. Blessed are those who have laid down their own agendas for a friend. Blessed are those whose love includes loss. Blessed are those who are uncomfortable still. Blessed are those whose faults are ever before them. Blessed are those who allow their failures to shape them, to unmake them, to make them anew. That one deserves a second run in light of the story I just told you. Blessed are those whose faults are ever before them. Blessed are those who allow their failures to shape them, to unmake them, to make them anew. Blessed are those who dare to follow the lead of prophets among us, those who dare to get into good trouble. Any thoughts on that one? Are we brave enough to do large group so that we don't have to do small group and then large group? Are we brave enough to toss out comments? Any thoughts from this one? Did it resonate anywhere? Nodding heads? Know anybody who you'd follow as a prophet? Takes a while to recognize the prophets among us, doesn't it? Really. A banking manager. was one of the prophets for me. She treated I was in banking for 6 years when I came to this country first, and she was my boss. And she treated everybody like they were a precious child of God. She never said, precious child of God. You just got it in the way that she respected people, in the way she spoke to them, in the way that she seriously wanted them to solve whatever critical issue had affected their performance that day. She used to call me long after I left banking and I had gotten into the church work, and she'd say, Tricia, there's a young Catholic woman who's working in my branch. She's having a lot of difficulties. Is there any chance you'd want to come over and have a cup of coffee with us during break time, and you and she might want to chat, or you and she and I might want to chat? I don't think I ever did any good, but the compassion, I tried, but the compassion that she showed in a corporate monetary environment was just extraordinary, because it was clear that she cared about the people. And when you care about the people, you care about that light of Christ that's inside of them. As I have said, despite the fact that occasionally we think that light of Christ is deeply disguised in the very heart of you. But some people, and this is why I love those who do 12-step programs, because in the 12-step program you learn to take away the crusts that can hide the light that you have within. You know, I have many family members who are 12-steppers, and they will say, yeah, you peel away. Sometimes they talk about onions. I prefer crust because it's harder to get through. They peel away the crust of the shame that they've carried for whatever reason over their lives, the mistakes, being hard on themselves, the name-calling they got from others, the derision they got from others. And they peel all of those away. And the 12-step process, I think, is a great spiritual process that allows you to let go, let go, let go, let go. And then one day you say, ha, there's lights there. Whoa. And of course, that's St. Augustine. I have my issue sometimes with St. Augustine and the way that he wrote as if Adam and Eve were historical stories. But other than that, he had great arguments to be made. And one of his great moments of wisdom was to understand this inner illumination that is the essence of God inside of us. And I just love that. And I think it's hopeful for people. I think it's why I try to live as a person of great hope, despite the fact that we're about to talk about a difficult thing called environmental crisis. I'm multi-techno today. Because Pope Francis is on my computer. And he's a little wordy, have you noticed? If he had sent me in one of his papers before it got published, I would have said, absolutely fantastic. Needs a little editing. Right? So, a poem first. Maybe you don't know strength until you've rested beneath the branches of a magnolia tree, feeling the weight of her regal waxed leaves. Maybe you don't know community until you've watched ants rebuild what was broken by a world much bigger than theirs. Maybe you don't know fortitude until you've noticed geese fly to the furthest border of warmth to protect their children. Maybe you don't know compassion until you place your hands in the dirt and feel the pulse of the earth, her heart and soul welcoming you. Maybe you don't know time until you run your fingers over a river rock, their skin softened by generations of magic. Maybe you don't know yourself until the mirror of the water reminds you of the goodness, your goodness, and brings you home again. And that's by Caitlin Curtis. I just love that one. And this little prayer, or it's a mix of scripture and science. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The sun is but a star in a galaxy called the Milky Way, which is home to 200 billion stars in a sky that has at least 200 billion galaxies. No wonder God rested. With every breath, we remember that life is a miracle and holy, and we give thanks. Later, God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered into a single basin, so that the dry land may appear." And so it happened. The dry land appeared. God called the dry land the earth. If we were to pick up one spoonful of soil, we would see that in it there are more organisms than there are people on earth. One spoonful of earth, more organisms than there are people on the earth. Without those organisms in the soil, human beings could not live. Big, everyday wonders. With every breath, we remember that life is a miracle and holy, and we give thanks. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth vegetation, every kind of plant that bears seed, and every kind of fruit tree on earth that bears fruit with its seed in it." Anybody can count the seeds in an apple. The harder task is to guess the number of apples in any one seed. Took me a while to follow that one. Science is not my forte. With every breath, we remember that life is a miracle and holy, and we give thanks. In my correspondence with Irene in preparation for being here, she had mentioned that one of the areas of Catholic social teaching that I might want to cover, rather than trying to cover all of Catholic social teaching, might be the environment. And so we started talking, she and I, about a year and a half ago. And at the time I came, because that's Irene, she's very well organized. And so I began to look at aspects of climate change from the scientific side. I'm familiar with Pope Francis, but this was from the scientific side. And because I'm a real neophyte, younger than a neophyte, with respect to the science of environment, I went to watch a wonderful TED Talk by a scientist called Asmeret Asifo-Berhe. And the title, and I'm pretty sure I put it, I hope, in the list of places that are good resources on this little section of handouts here. And it's called "A Climate Change Solution That's Right Under Our Feet." And I loved the simplicity of this. She says, "The way we treat soil can help us combat climate change's destiny." Now, I've heard that because I have a sister whose artistic work focuses on the way in which we treat agriculture, the way in which we develop agricultural policy, what we do about policy for food insecurity. She's relentless in that respect. The star of a 36-minute movie that she made that got wonderful reviews for a big exhibition that she had, which involved simply the movie. The star was the dung beetle. Big picture of a black, shiny dung beetle. And in her film, she shows how the dung beetle gets into that beautiful thing called dung, left by the cows that were appropriately feeding in the field. And we see the activity and we hear the voices of the voice of the dung beetle. That's not what the lady in the TED Talk said. That's just my sister. The soil. There's a concentration of carbonization in the atmosphere. Here are the numbers. So much. 9.4 billion metric tons of carbon is being released into the atmosphere right now from human actions. 9.4 billion metric tons. Now, the good news is this. Only half of that is actually causing danger in our environment right now, because half of that number is being taken up by natural ecosystems. It turns out that when the carbon gets emitted into the atmosphere, it turns out that it can come down and settle into the soil, and I only speak rookie science. It settles into the soil, and the soil functions like a sponge that absorbs that carbon, which I have now learned to say carbon is the bad thing. And so, I mean, for the health of the planet, if it stays out there. And so the land, the soil, good soil, absorbs the carbon, and about 50% of it is getting absorbed. So we only have 50% of a problem. It's still a lot of billion metric tons of carbon, but 50% is being taken up through the land, through the sea, and through what we also call carbon sequestration. And they are bailing us out for now. However, although we're only experiencing 50% of the consequences, unless we do something fast, emissions are going to rise. Also, the ability, we know that, the emissions, that's why we keep trying to diminish the number of emissions that we have. But on top of that, the ability of all of those natural resources, the soil and the sea and so on, to absorb that half is actually being severely diminished. So right now we can say, oh, thank goodness there's soil. But the problem is we're degrading the soil. And so the soil now no longer has the capacity to do the great work of keeping at least half of the bad stuff away from us. Do you see what I mean? And that's what this woman in the TED conference was saying. Soil is just a thin veil that covers the surface of our land. 6 feet of soil, that's the crucial potential. It's the difference, she says, between life and lifelessness, because of the fact that soil can store carbon. And carbon comes into the soil, but can also leave the soil. And carbon can leave the soil when there are elements in the soil that stop it from having the strength that it has. And my sister's words for that is, soil becomes dirt. Dirt is bad. Dirt is soil that has simply been used up. All of the nutrients that properly belong in the soil, they've been used up, and all you have is dirt. And the way in which we are doing farming at the moment, this large-scale, huge farming, employing all of the elements and chemicals that we need in order to produce the yields that we need. And all of the things that we use, the chemicals that we use in order to keep some of the insects away, they are ending up degrading the soil, so that bit by bit, the usefulness of that soil's ability to conserve, or to, if you like, store and keep us safe from the carbon is being diminished. And that's just really bad news. It's also happening in the area that we call with respect to the permafrost, the very, very cold area of the planets that almost like, you know how some people have a deep freezer, you know, that they don't open. I have a son-in-law whose father and brother are they raise cattle in regenerative type agriculture, I hasten to say, down in Missouri. But they have my son-in-law has a deep freezer because he gets these little bits of meat that are sent up beautifully wrapped and labeled from his brother, you know. So we get the occasional ground beef and steak and so on. Well, if you like, the permafrost is like the deep freeze. It stores long term. And we keep hearing how it's getting warmer and warmer And that matters because the permafrost isn't keeping things cold anymore. So my language for that in my simplistic way is to say our freezer's kind of not working so well anymore. And so the long-term ability to store the carbons that we need to be stored, they're being diminished. And one of my favorite authors, I mentioned her, I think the first night, is Robin Wall Kimmerer. One of my friends is an economist. He's one of those folks that knows the world by numbers. And I said to him, I knew him from the Just Faith Ministries board, so I knew he had interest in social justice and all of that thing. But he walks and talks like a man who lives in numbers. And I said to him one day, I've just finished reading this book. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass. And he said, Robin Wall Kimmerer, best book I ever read in my life. Just not what you think if you're imagining what an avid economist is going to be reading. He said it changed his life. It changed mine. I walk differently on the earth because of this book. She's a scientist. She's a professor of botany at one of the universities, I always say up on the right-hand side. I have to stop saying that now. I've been here for many years. Up around Massachusetts or somewhere like that. Somewhere in that area. Might be one of the Boston universities. Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass. If you look at best books of a certain year, I think it came out about, maybe 10 years ago now or so. 2013 it came out, yeah. And it was regarded as one of the best books of the year. And I have written some of the words of hers that absolutely enchant me. She speaks about the Anishinaabe original man. She's a professor of botany. She writes like a poet. She writes beautifully. And on top of that, she's a member of the citizen Potawatomi tribe. Okay? So, the citizen Potawatomi tribe. It took me ages to learn how to say Potawatomi. And I think I have it right. But Robin Wall Kimmerer, you'll find her. She's absolutely amazing because her book is about what she has learned from scientific research and learning, and also what she has received as the gift from her grandparents and her parents, and what she teaches her students. And it's absolutely extraordinary. And she writes about what her native tribe calls the original man, the Anishinaabe original man, whose name was Nanabostro. His teachings remind us that one half of the truth is that the earth endows us with great gifts. The other half is that the gift is not enough. The responsibility does not lie, for example, with the maple tree, the maples alone. The other half belongs to us. We participate in its transformation. It is our work and our gratitude that distills the sweetness. Before I read this book, I thought, I walk upon the earth and I live on it, and it's different from me. And of course, out of, the stewardship that we learn about in our sacred text, the stewardship of the land, you try to do right by it. But I did not identify myself as being one with the land. What she points out, and I'll spare you the language from this very learned book, which is rather thick in its theology, Climate Church, Climate World, How People of Faith Can Work for Change, Jim Antal, and it's got a beautiful foreword by Bill McGibbon, a big name in climate change in the Christian world. And what she says is, and what our Catholic theologians are beginning to say is, we're not just here happening to be on top of a world that was there before us. We are part and parcel of the fullness of life of the entire planet on which we live, and we haven't even begun to imagine the many, many billions of other stars that are out there that might also have planets, right? But here, we are as much a growth process of the evolving life of the planet as the trees and the plants are. And theologian John Hott, actually he's the really dense one, took me ages to read. You know when you spend 6 days reading one page? It's one of those. So I'm always trying to get the kindergarten version for myself so that I can speak to it. And what he says is, we have a role as participants in the life of the planet. And our role is to be the articulating voices that explain the fullness of us all, including the planet. Our role is to speak to what the trees are trying to tell us, what the land is trying to tell us, what the waters are trying to tell us, and to see ourselves as one in equality, not users, and not even tillers so much as one with the life. Because it goes back to, we love life. And Catholics particularly know how to speak to our respect for life, all life. And so our job is to articulate the voices to those who are walking on the land of those who are not yet heard. It's why my sister, who does not actually profess any religious faith, it's why her artistic work and mine are philosophically amazingly close. It's fascinating. However, what she says is the dung beetle is the star of her film because it's the dung beetle's voice and the work of the dung beetle that she wants to make heard among the people of the land. Does that make sense? Because if we don't pay attention to our need, and I never knew about it. I didn't know until I went to her first farm walkabout one time about 5 years ago when she was planning this whole artwork. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a dung beetle, and I certainly wouldn't have thought that it was going to be the star of a show that brought 800 people to her exhibition the first night, which is pretty impressive. And I couldn't believe the wisdom that she had in saying, this is only one of the voices that are not yet heard when it comes to speaking about the care of the environment. And she doesn't even use that phrase, care of the environment, anymore. She says, it's about us. And so for the first time, and after you've read, and I know you're going to dash, aren't you, to your local independent bookstore, perhaps, and you're going to read Braiding Sweetgrass, and you'll say, Tricia was right. I walk differently on the grass now. I walk differently on the beaches. I wake differently. I have a grandson whose name is Banks Arthur. I have 9 grandchildren and another on the way. But Banks Arthur happens to be the one that lives in Traverse City with me after I moved from Arizona. And in the morning, if I happen to be staying at his house, he'll say, Nana, are you waking up? I say, yes, I am. He says, are we going to say good morning? I said, yes, we are. And my daughter lives in a lovely place where you can look out and see water, Lake Michigan, and so on. And we stand at the window and we raise our arms and we say, good morning and thank you. Thank you for being our water today. Thank you for being our sun today. Now I add, thank you, God. Thank you, God, for this beautiful creation. And he says, yeah, that too, you know? But this idea of giving thanks, when he, right now with the leaves falling, he wants to pick the leaves and take them home. And I said, don't forget to say thank you. And so he'll pick the leaves up and he'll hold all the beautiful reds and yellows and he'll say, Nana, do I have to say thank you? We should say thank you because the trees, we don't know what their voices are saying, but we should make sure that they know that we're listening. And that's the point, that they know that we're listening. And that's what Pope Francis's talks are all about. That we need to be listening. The world is speaking, our planet is speaking to us, and we're not always listening particularly well. So I have, Pope Francis, where are you? How am I on time? Running short. clearly decided to hide himself like the yeast of the woman baker. He decided quickly to hide himself. But Pope Francis, have any of you read, I'm sure lots of you have read or heard of Laudato Si. What about Laudate Deum? I felt so badly for him. My heart was broken for him because he has a beautiful intro, and he goes on in paragraph 2 in Laudate Deum, which just came out, a year-ish ago. He says, 8 years have passed since I published the encyclical letter Laudato Si. That's why I felt badly for him. When I wanted to share with all of you, my brothers and sisters of our suffering planet, my heartfelt concerns about the care of our common home. Yet, with the passage of time, I have realized that our responses have not been adequate. While the world in which we live is collapsing and may be nearing the breaking point. In addition to this possibility, it is indubitable that the impact of climate change will increasingly prejudice the lives and families of many persons. A time out for a moment while I say Pope Francis never speaks about the environment without speaking about the particular and increased danger that the fragile environment is causing to those who are the most vulnerable among us. Catholic Relief Services have magnificent, smallish clips that you'll find on the CRS stream of videos on YouTube that speak about the ways in which climate change has impacted the farming communities in Africa, and what CRS, which is to my mind one of the most stellar Catholic Relief Services, is the action of the US bishops, their voice in action beyond the world of the United States. It's their outreach and solidarity and community oneness with all of those countries that are outside of the US. And you have one collection a year that funds Catholic Relief Services. And I always say they're doing this action in your name. So be generous. But they're an absolutely extraordinary organization, very, very well respected in the NGO world in general. And what they show in their videos, and we just don't have the time to run videos and show you these, but they show the difficulties experienced by people who, if they can't do something to make their land more fertile and change it from having turned to dirt, find some way to turn it back into soil, they won't be able to grow anything on that land. And you wonder why there's such massive migrations from Africa up towards the north and then on into Europe. That's why. It's not only violence and bad management in some of the countries and things and economic difficulties, it's hugely about climate change. And we're here because, oh yeah, it's bad, we had bad storms, but we're not understanding that we're an enormous part of the problem. With our thirst for more and more technology and more industrialization, which doesn't always take care of the goodness of the land. In Phoenix, Arizona, we call it the Valley. I lived in Scottsdale, but there's Phoenix and Scottsdale and Glendale and Mesa and all of these other towns, and we call it all the Valley because it's all in a bowl. And the air stays very stagnant in the bowl, and we get a lot of pollution because it's in a valley and we don't have much wind. But a friend of mine who took a Just Faith class on the environment that we were running just a few years ago, she's an expert on water. She's a civil engineer, an expert on water, and she says, Tricia, in the whole valley, starting on the east side, the lower east side, down to the south of the valley, across the south part of the valley, and then up the west side, all of the groundwater in that strip is contaminated. The groundwater is contaminated and will never be recovered. Never be recovered. I didn't know that groundwater contaminated with certain chemicals can never be recouped. It can never be fixed. And so she's a little upset about the fact that over here on the west side of Phoenix, kind of as you'd be heading towards LA, We have what our politicians are delighted about, huge investment in, I think they're chips that will make more iPhones and more smartphones and more technology work. And I was so surprised to hear this demure, wonderful woman say, when will our thirst for better and better and faster and more, when will it stop driving us to the extent that we don't pay attention to what we're doing around us? Those weren't my words, those were her words, and I bow to them as one does sometimes. You know, Pope Francis goes on to say this is a global social issue and one intimately related to the dignity of human life. See, no separation anymore. It's what Robin Wall Kimmerer says, and it's what the scientists are saying, and it's what the theologians are saying. It's not just that we should be a bit careful. It's that there's a oneness to this. And then he commends the bishops of the United States. Pope Francis says the bishops of the United States have expressed very well the social meaning of our concern about climate change, which goes beyond a merely ecological approach, because, he's quoting, our care for one another and our care for the earth are intimately bound together. Climate change is one of the principal challenges facing society and the global community. The effects of climate change are borne by the most vulnerable people, whether at home or around the world. And he continues then, in a few words, the bishops assembled for the Synod for Amazonia said the same thing. He quotes, attacks on nature have consequences for people's lives. And to express bluntly that this is no longer a secondary or ideological question, but a drama that harms us all, the African bishops stated that climate change makes manifest, quote, a tragic and striking example of structural sin. Structural sin. We're used to, remember, some of us are old enough to have been brought up on those two classic types of sin, mortal and venial. And then later, much to the chagrin of many people, we realized that there's social sin and systemic sin. And systemic sin is the kind of sin that structural sin is. It's the sin that we don't take personal accountability for. Why? Because it's, well, those other people, they're doing their business and so on, and who am I to critique? But they're creating structures that are now recognized as part of systemic sin. So I said I'd be grim today because it is a bit grim. But we have work to do. We have to become people who listen. And you're becoming a people who listen, because I hear your care for and your appreciation for synodality. And the listening experience is very important, not because it gives us work to do so that we can come and have a synodal set of meetings, perhaps in our parish, which I hope you have, and I know you've had already. But it's not for the purpose of coming back and saying, let's fix the administration of the church. It's not a planning committee. It's so that the experience of listening helps inform us and helps feed us with the personhood of the other. I didn't get that in the beginning. And I thought we were going to be, following up and doing lots of plans for the administration of the parish. And my friend Mary Permoda, a very wise woman, she said, no, Tricia, synodality is the way we do church now. And I said, oh, it's about the listening? And she said, yes, it's about the listening. We lean in and we hear and we connect, because listening provides the encounter. And when we encounter another, we hear their personhood. And we can never bring judgment. Once you've heard somebody talk about what they consider to be important, whether you agree with it or not, ends up not to be the point, because they're sharing the reason they think why they do and what they care about and what their concerns are. And you think, that's holy ground. And you walk away knowing that you've just walked a little bit on holy ground. And so this listening is massively important. And Edward Guinan is a writer whose work I respect. Let's see if I put his name in for you in the resources. didn't. Well, my email is here. So email me if you'd like to have the reading from Edward Guinan. I won't go through, of course, the whole reading, but I wanted to point it out to you because he writes about the importance of listening. And in one way, you can think of listening as something that we do to each other, for each other. But I find that it's even more important just to listen to our world, just to stop and pause and listen. I used to be the pool lady in Arizona. Everybody has pools, sorry. I used to be the pool lady in our house. Didn't love being the pool lady, but my husband was the cook and the shopper. I was the pool lady. I'd go outside every single morning, I'd open the sliding doors, and I'd just listen. From the sound of the pool filter, I could tell whether it was in wellness or not. I could tell, it's clogged with leaves. We had a big ficus tree right over the pool. I'm going to have to go out and do the back washing or empty the filter. Just the listening gave me a sense of the wellness of the pool. And that's only a piece of machinery. But I realized it's an apt analogy for what we do with each other, especially if you're not naturally intuitive. I'm very intuitive and I have zero sensate. On the Myers-Briggs, I don't see what's in front of my face. Cannot see a darn thing. Couldn't tell you what you're wearing, whether you wear glasses or not a clue. God bless my former husband. He used to be able to tell me what was on my fork when I was eating fish at a restaurant in Peru in 1979. I had not those kind of eyes. But the intuitive have a good time with listening because they'll listen and they'll say, there's a story there, or there's something going on there. And I had that kind of intuitive listening. And Edward Guinan speaks about that kind of leaning in and listening. And he speaks about it specifically in the attempt to overcome the conflict areas that we have in our lives. And he says, he has something that, he says, hunger, poverty, squalor, privilege, powerlessness, riches, despair, and vicarious living, they are all forms of violence, forms that a society approves of and perpetuates. He says violence could be seen, if you like, as destructive communication. And if we engage in a way of living that allows us to lean into the other and just pay attention and just find everything to be holy. And again, remember my mantra these 3 days have been without judgment. No judgment, no judgment, no. Drop our judgmentalism. Put it behind us. And have a sense of humor about yourself when you go home and say, the judgmentalism showed up again today. I'll try again tomorrow. You have to have a sense of humor about yourself or you won't forgive yourself and you'll find yourself unworthy. And John Gallen, this marvelous theologian, said that instead of praying, oh Lord, I am not worthy, and going in the old way that we used to say it, or Lord, I am not worthy, but say only the word, but my soul shall be healed. That back in the day, he said, it should be, oh Lord, I am not worthy, and thank goodness that isn't the point, and say only the word, but my soul shall be healed. And so if you ever see my lips moving right before communion, it's because they're sneaking in a little bit, and thank goodness that isn't the point. But if we can't make fun of ourselves and find ourselves unworthy and that's not the point, we won't be able to scrutinize our actions. We won't be able to do that listening in that we must do in order to become the kinds of holy people of God that we want to become. We're reaching our end, as it happens. Last night, I forgot to tell them something that I told you I would say at the beginning when I addressed you during the Masses. And I read you the poem by Seamus Heaney and talked about hearts broken open, right? And last night I forgot to kind of bookend that one in closure. I'm going to bookend it, and then I'm going to offer you one closing poem. I have a friend, Lisa, who is sister of the Religious of the Sacred Heart, the RSCJs. Sometimes people have told me they're known as the Madams. They're marvelous people. They teach at Catholic and have taught for years at Catholic Theological Union. I was tremendously privileged to spend a lot of time with them. And Barbara Bow was one of the premier New Testament scholars who I had incredible privilege to be able to hang out with, and for an extended period of time. And much to everybody's grief, Barbara Bow was diagnosed with a fast tumor in her brain, and had only about 6 months to live. And Lisa, who at the time was early in her becoming a vowed sister, lived with her in Chicago, right across from CTU, and was caring for her. And she said, I was holding, they called her Barbie, which she did not look like a Barbie at all. It really confused me, but it was Barb B, because she was Barbara Bow, because Barbara Reed was also teaching in the same place. So Barbie, Lisa was holding her, and she said she knew it was the last day, and she could hear her breathing, and she could feel her heart beating slowly, 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 and getting slower, slower, and slower as the day went on. And Lisa said to me afterwards, we're religious of the Sacred Heart, and we've always had an appreciation for the Sacred Heart of God. And she said, as I held Barbie, and I felt her heartbeat get softer and softer and softer, and we usually use the language, her heartbeat stopped, and she said, I realized it was not stopping. Her heartbeat was being returned to the one heart of God. She said, she said, I've developed my own spirituality now that understands that when we become a human person at the start of our lives, we are being gifted with the one heart of God. And then it becomes ours in our body, and then at the end of our lives, that heart that we have returns to where it belongs, to the one heart of God. I grew up scared of the Sacred Heart because the little statue in our house had the little blood around it, and I always thought it was kind of a little iffy as something to treasure. When my dad died, he said he had told my mom, because I was in South America, he said, give the statue to Tricia. I got the statue. I still have it, and I'm so glad I never threw it away, because when Lisa told me that, I said, I can have this be my sacred ground, right? The one heart of God. So I invite you to that spirituality of thinking about our heartbeat and the heartbeat of our world also now, as we think in larger pictures. And so I wanted to kind of end up with that particular heart analogy, if you like, with you. But I want to end with this poem. It's one that I wrote because I was asked by the Los Angeles Religious Education director, a wonderful woman, Sister Rosalia Reza. She called me and she asked me if I would be willing to write the opening proclamation for the opening event in the Anaheim Convention Center it's a very large Congress. In the past they had 40,000 people attending, and 19,000 people fit in the arena, and there are these horrible big scantrons up on the side where your face is about 10 times the size of your body, those scantrons. And she asked me if I'd be willing to write the opening proclamation. And she said, our theme is Embrace Grace. Embrace Grace. But she said the Archbishop would really like us to have an emphasis on the Eucharistic. They were having the Eucharistic theme, for a few years of celebrating the Eucharist up until the beginning of this year, actually, and this was year before last. And I said, well, I'll give it a bash. And so I wrote this poem, and it turned out they liked it. And so then they said, but you better read it. So I had to do the reading of it too. It was one thing to write it, it's another thing to read it. But I got over myself, as one does, great spiritual act to try to get over oneself. But I offer you this as our closing poem. Is it you? Within the silent explosions of cosmic presence, before time, after time, timeless, timeful, Holy Spirit's word breathes its question. Is it you? Is it you, the one, the many, who can open heart body, fullness of being to the divine invitation. Sweet breath infused with love whispers through the ages, winds its gentle way, ripples the shadows of our time to settle among us today, here in this place, asking, is it you? Will it be your tentative fingers, your hesitant arms, fear in the trembling and hope in the stretching that dare to reach out and embrace sweet grace? People of God, pilgrims one and all, our journeys have brought us to prayer, to oneness, to communion this day, and we rejoice in the divine migration that brought God in Christ to us. We celebrate that extraordinary cosmic border crossing that led Wisdom Sophia to pitch a tent in this world among us, beloved ones of the Creator. Yet, the sacred created life, earth, waters, air, and all beating hearts, groan beneath the weight of crushing neglect or pain. These are times of tribulation, of violent rhetoric, violent assault, of suffering and injustice, awaiting a liberation that never seems to arrive. So our God asks again, is it you? Is it you who will roar, we believe in the presence real, the sacrament true, sacred in bread that is broken and wine that is crushed, and just as sacred in the last and least of society? Is it you, my beloved, my Eucharistic people, who will seize courage, graced courage, and issue with Benedict XVI the rallying cry that says, a Eucharist that does not pass over into the concrete practice of love is intrinsically fragmented? Could it be that this holy gathering, fortified with sacramental nourishment, can dare to assert with Father Pedro Arrupe, when people are hungry anywhere in the world, the Eucharist is incomplete? Can we then grasp hold of the grace? Can we make that sweet embrace that propels us to offer our lives, our fellowship, our solidarity with all men and women, a living form of spiritual worship, holy and pleasing to God? Is it you who will stay with the struggles, knowing justice and beauty are worth the pain, even when we lose? Is it you who will insist in the startling powers of the human embrace? Instruments of grace, all, if we but accept it, share it, use it as transformative power. Within the silent explosions of cosmic presence, before time, after time, timeless, time full. Now, Holy Spirit's word breathes its question. Is it you? Amen? Amen. Thank you for having me be here. Please take time to thank, he's over there in the background, please take time to thank two people particularly. Thank Father Matt for his care for the well-being of your parish. I'm stunned. There he is. Come on. Oh, face it, face it. You have a wise pastor who is deeply caring and self-aware and honest. I love it. And deeply caring of the well-being of the people of this parish, and actually the well-being of the well-being of all souls, I would dare to say, in this area in general. And so I've just absolutely been privileged to be here. And then please go find Irene. And she's hiding. Irene, you may not lurk behind the pillar. May we give a round of applause to Irene? I'm not kidding you when I tell you it was probably about a year and a half ago when she first contacted me. And every single detail, every question, every way of making sure that things were being organized happened because of her follow-through and attention to detail. So you have a wonder among wonders here. So, and you have a pair of leaders, and somewhere you have your wonderful deacon as well. And the people of this parish who have shuttled me back and forth and shown me beautiful places to see, and whose daughter gave me a slice of fabulous pie to eat, and such marvelous hospitality that I have experienced since I've been here. And so I say the very simple and unworthy words, thank you. Thank you. Take good care.
This is a giant bouquet of flowers you can take on the plane.
Oh, God bless you. God bless you for that.
Hey, probably it's been an amazing day. Everyone that has heard you speak, water.
Thank you. You're so kind. Thank you. Yes.